welcome you for tonight. It's our third edition of the Prague Business Leaders Networking event here, and it's the second time in honor with Pepper de Callier together tonight. It's like the leadership series of people who are defining the future. Have a nice evening at the Kempinski Hotel here in Prague. Enjoy a very interesting conversation here, followed by a brilliant dinner served by Kempinski. And I would like to hand over to our partner, Pepper de Callier. Wish you a beautiful evening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And thank you all for coming. On my immediate right, Robert Schönfeld, who in 1991, with some property that was returned to his family, got into property management in the Czech Republic. And then later on formed RSBC, which is a capital management and property management firm operating in Great Britain, Central and Eastern Europe, and Southeastern Asia today. He funded, founded, and now runs the largest international music school here in Prague. It's the International School of Music and Fine Arts, 400 students and over 70 teachers. In the middle, one of the most respected leaders in the Czech Republic, Pavel Kysilka. Pavel is the driving force not only behind the market-leading bank, Ceska Sporitelna, but what Ipsos calls the most socially responsible corporation in the Czech Republic, Ceska Sporitelna. He also heads up what is the largest CSR fund in the history of this country, more than 2 billion crowns, and we're going to talk about that a little bit through the evening tonight. And then at the end here, my friend Petr Sykora. Petr Sykora is a former Boy Scout that never forgot the value of hard work and helping others. He and his partner built Papirius and sold it to Office Depot. And at the risk of embarrassing him in that event, made him a very wealthy young man. But unlike a lot of wealthy young men, this young man has spent his life helping others. He founded, funded, and staffed a school in the Himalayas for a remote village that takes something like 10 days or 2 weeks just to get to, and has founded, with his partner at Papirius, Good Angel, which is a very interesting concept in providing aid to very ill, terminally ill children and families, which we'll talk about later on. 3 different models of CSR here tonight, and 3 different, very interesting approaches to it. So let's get started and jump into this. I'd like to begin really with just asking for our friends here to define what CSR is to you, and how does your approach to it fit with that definition. Petr, you want to jump in with that one?
Well, I think the fact that you found 85 million hits on a search engine suggests that there are many people out there who really don't know, and they are searching for the definition. Also both the Himalayan school, Surya, and Good Angel or Dobrý Anděl are very non-corporate. In my view, I would just use the term helping others, helping other people. And when you use the term corporate, it definitely involves corporations, companies, who have one very specific advantage as opposed to either individuals or governments, that today they are quite powerful. Sometimes they can act quickly. So if you just take, for example, Apple sitting on 120 billion of cash, if they would decide, they could potentially wipe out malaria from the planet Earth in a couple of years. So there is lots of power sitting with companies like Pavel is running, for example.
Pavel, what's your view CSR?
Yeah, for me, CSR is to a certain extent, new word for the old good content. Every generation must create their new words for old stuff, we did it as well, which is not bad, because if it attracts attention and helps in practice to do right things, I like it. And what does this mean for me? In broader sense, it's everything that, in very broad sense, it's everything that a corporate or a firm, an organization can do in the society, which in broad sense it can be even business if it is done responsibly and in ethical way, etc., and in compliance with everything, and in market economy, if you do it ethically, so you earn money only if you are useful for the others. It's a miracle of market economy. In narrow sense, and CSR is usually.
I mean, so what you've opened the door to a much broader view of it, in the sense that corporate social responsibility is not only the philanthropy involved in it, but it's how you conduct yourself in business.
Absolutely. Definitely in narrow sense is something how corporates can share their money, capabilities, capacities, and share with the society to help the society in something that could be pain point for the society, something needed, something that helps to develop the society, to make it more competitive, etc., etc.
Okay, and we'll get into a little bit deeper some of your thoughts about this, because I think they're very interesting. Robert, how does it fit for you? I mean, what is CSR? I mean, you and I talked about it earlier, and you joked that you didn't even realize what it was when you
that's right.
when you got involved.
In all honesty, I had no clue. But for me, it's not about corporate philosophy. For me, it's more about what is it you want to do with your own life. It is what kind of what value you have for your being, you know. Is it when you help others, in which way you help them, what are your possibilities to help? It's much more personal for me than let's say a corporate strategy. So,
well, the thing that I find interesting, I mean, the three of you are certainly powerful influences in this field. But how did you gain an interest in it? I mean, what sparked your interest in CSR? I know you and I had an interesting discussion about music. Why don't you share some of that with us and let us know how you got started in all of this?
I have to say that I truly never wanted to do business, but here I am doing business. So I was this talented musician, and
what instrument?
Yeah, I played violin since childhood, and then the year while I was studying at the conservatory with Nora Grubnikova, she was a very famous teacher. Then I studied Prague Academy, but in 1990, when the restitution process, you know, for those who do not know, it's when the communist government confiscated the assets of wealthy families, the new government in 1990 was returning it back to the original owners. So my family restituted some assets, and it was sizable. I was the only child, so I had to take care about, you know. And it started with rental contracts. And there, I was sitting there practicing Johann Sebastian Bach sonata. And then there called these lawyers and said, Mr. Schönfeld, you should have been at this meeting. We're waiting, you know, you were supposed to sign this rental agreement, you know.
A rude awakening to the real world.
Yeah, it was. So I learned it the hard way. So yeah, I was, you know, going through the academy, but I already knew that there is another career waiting for me. So almost parallelly, I was studying much more economics, and I had to study legal stuff. You know, we had lots of, how do you call it, regulated tenants, you know, at that time. It was a big issue. You know, you had to imagine you have an apartment building, and there are these tenants which pay you. At that time, you have to understand, the tenants were paying 85 Czech korunas per month for one apartment downtown Prague. Yeah, very.
Do you
downtown.
have any of those still left?
Oh, that's a good question. In fact, I think yes, we still have some, but it's a different rent now. Yeah. So I had to go with the lawyers through the issues because some of them were criminals, and it was just nightmare. So I felt like, why me? I didn't need any properties, you know. I was very happy as it was, but that's what happened.
So what got you into this this philanthropic effort? I mean, what spurred that?
It was that I never really wanted to leave the world of art. You know, it was my world. I loved it, and I still love it. So the only way how to combine it was that I create something what doesn't need my full-time dedication as the violin did, you know, and so that I remain in touch with all the people, with the culture life. You know, I knew their problems because I knew it firsthand. And then, as many things in life, it came by an accident. Somebody asked me in 1996, 7, and it was a foreigner living in Prague, and asked me, well, you know, I know you played violin. Do you know, is there any teacher or any school which could teach my kids? And I said, well, sure, Prague, come on, it's the city of music, you know. And then I called the music schools, not called, first, second. I called like 50, and they all said, well, we don't teach in English. And it was very embarrassing, you know. You have all these foreigners here, they come, you know, Dvořák, Smetana, and Janáček, and so on. And then when they want to have a very simple service, like teaching voice or flute, there is nothing on the market. So yeah, I started to play with the idea that I'll set up my school, and my friends were telling me, you're absolutely nuts. At this time, the schools are being closed. They don't have enough students. Kids are interested in computers. They don't play music anymore. But I was stubborn enough, and I started with 2 teachers, violin and piano. We had 12 students. The first concert was at our apartment, and the people, they loved it. And from the beginning, I said we have to focus on 2 things. One is the need of the musicians, because there are some very excellent musicians in the town, but they don't have a regular income, which is the biggest issue for them. Now, you have to understand that even the most brilliant musicians, professional, they have concerts for which they gain nice money, but it's not regular.
And I want to get into the model, because the model that you have is very interesting. We're going to get into that in a second. I want to go to the other violin player on the panel. And that would be the gentleman sitting in the middle. Pavel, how did you get interested in your drive for CSR and the importance it has in your life? Because I know it is.
Maybe this one of the strongest personal impulses for me was that my parents worked with mentally handicapped children, and I kept in touch very closely every day with them. My sister and I now would add that I don't need to focus that only or stress it that it's visible. And then, if you find yourself on the side of happier people, so you feel that it would be great to do something for the others. So you always You always feel it like that. When I joined Česká Sporitelna, it's much closer to your question. I love to study history of everything. I do so. I love music, so I love even the history of music. When I joined Česká Sporitelna, I studied the history of Česká Sporitelna, and I found that it was established not primarily as a business organization. It was established in 1825, more as CSR project, because hitherto, until 1825 or 18 something, the banks banked only with bankable people, which meant top 1% of the population. And suddenly somebody invented to try something more, to teach people to stand on their own feet and to teach them what the Germans call, because it was the mission or the motto of Česká Sporitelna and our savings bank that time, German savings bank, Arbeite, Sammle, Vermehre. You understand probably. And even
I don't understand that.
The Arbeite is work, Sammle is spend, save, and Vermehre is not invest but rozšiřuj.
Grow, increase.
No, increase, Vermehre.
So the bank was founded on the principles of
CSR,
helping.
and one evidence, great evidence, is that time the emperor, Caesar, of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire contributed not from the state budget but from his own pocket by 5,000 zlatých, golden money, which was unbelievable amount of money, to establishing Česká Sporitelna in Böhmische Sparkasse in the country. Then but it switched to become nice business as well. So in the history Česká Sporitelna then step by step focus on education, music. Rudolfinum was established by Česká Sporitelna, caring for blind people, Palata, we continue in it. So for me it was respect to the history, but as well respect to the future of the society.
The Rudolfinum was a project of Česká Sporitelna?
Yes.
Thank you.
That wasn't me. I'm not so old.
Now, Petr, you have an interesting twist on this. I mean, you took CSR from a very early age to a practice that you now conduct with your family on a nightly basis, your two sons. Let's go back, though, to when you were young, and you told me when you were a Boy Scout is really when you got interested in this, and I want you to bring it forward to today to a very personal level, to the discussion you have with your sons every night before they go to bed, and the 3 questions you ask them.
It's quite personal, and it might sound even bizarre to those of you who are not familiar with it, but however, as a Boy Scout, we would live so-called blue life, modrý život. I'm sure the boys, Czech boys in the panel would know, and in the audience as well. And so we would have a matrix with several columns, and per each day in a month or in a week. And one of those blue squares would be a so-called good deed in a particular day. And I remember as boys, you just in the evening, sit down and fill in the boxes and realize, wow, we have forgotten to do the good deed, and then we would go take the garbage out or do the things we hated to do as boys. But eventually, later on, I realized that I really loved the inside feeling. I felt joy after having done it, looking backwards. And I think that's the time and that's the age when characters are formed. And we have 2 boys back home, and I think as parents we are probably not very strict, but there are 3 questions which I ask them on most nights, almost every night, and one of them is whether they have done a good deed in that particular day. And at the beginning it was really funny, because we started when Philip was 3.5 and Patrick was 5 at the time, and they really didn't quite get a clue what a good deed is, that it's something they do on their own initiative to help someone else. So they would pick bottles of beer on the street and do a lot of funny things. But even after, it's been 2 years or so since we have been practicing this, I already feel quite confident that they get the feeling, they understand their inner feeling they are getting out of this. And eventually, as they grow, our power to influence will diminish. It will happen rather soon, I think. And then they might take a break for a decade, but later on, I think it will, in their lives, it will kick in again, and it will be hopefully deep in their personalities. And I think it's not only for helping others and their spiritual well-being, but I think if it's really deep in them, they'll eventually be rather successful in their lives, in classic sense.
People think about CSR, and I know when I started doing research on this, and 15 years ago in the United States, when it really became a hot topic to discuss, people thought about it in the macro sense. But in my discussions with each of you in the last couple of weeks, what I got a sense of is that to you, it not only is that macro view CSR, but CSR on a micro level is what each of us do, and that sometimes the CSR effort, the larger macro effort, drives that experience. Does that encapsulate some of the discussions that we had, Robert? Do you agree with that? I mean, how do you look at that?
For me, the corporate level is rather anonymous. It's more like how I perceive it is more it's part of the marketing of the company. So I believe that a true helping is when you yourself get your hands dirty. You know, that's what counts in my opinion. The fact that you give to your PR manager or your marketing manager a task to, you know, do something, and okay, well, this is our annual budget here, so we donate this % to this and that. It's fine, it's necessary, but it's not my thing. You know, I understand the necessity for the corporations to do that, but really precious things in the real help is when you use your own abilities to create the help. Because if you're an executive level, you've probably, and this is now ideal world, you probably are very smart and good. You know, of course there are some executives which just get lucky, yeah. But still, majority are good people who work very hard and are smart and are creative. So I always try to include my colleagues within our company. Now you have to understand we're a small company, yeah? We're 25 people in total, so it's nothing big.
But are you saying then that there is, in your view, a conflict between being a large company and delivering CSR at the level that you relate to, or?
Not necessarily. No, I'm sure there are companies, and we've talked about some examples just before the start of this, which managed to do that. You know, but in my opinion, there are not that many. You know.
Pavel, I mean, this is something I know you're very involved from a standpoint yourself of going out and doing these things. What does that mean to you? I mean, is this something that is just part of how you view this, that you've got to get out there and get involved in these projects, or do you not?
our approach is that back to how we started now the blog. We try to combine the macro and micro effort, because you always live in a certain place, small village, so small city, etc. So for instance, we give our employees space to select their own small individual project. They have 3 days during a year to do what they consider important.
You give them time off during the working day to go work on their project?
Exactly. They can select based on their local knowledge, which is very important, because you can't cover everything, and sometimes you can contribute by your hands. It's important. They go there. They help themselves, not by money.
So that's part of the program.
Yes.
Is that they go out and do the work.
At the same time, we realize that some social pain points or some social issues can be addressed and covered only by really large projects that are open, by the way. It's very important that you start some big projects and you enable the others to join and to contribute, but somebody must start it. It's very important. And so our effort is always to combine the micro and macro effort. And on the macro, we are definitely a large company covering the whole territory of the country, and we can afford probably more than the others. But we keep it purely as philanthropy or CSR. It must be even related to our revenues, to our daily business, but should be linked to our roots, and maybe long term to something that is related to the area we are active in the society, on the business side.
Is CSR, Petr? Is this something that what in your view what we used to call corporate philanthropy in the 20th century? I mean, is it the same thing with a different name, or is it an evolution in some way today?
I have no doubt that it evolves, definitely, because more as companies also, and the largest companies get even larger, people realize that with power comes responsibility. That's one dimension to it. The other one would be that, and we clearly see it in our business, Good Angel, in the project, and perhaps Robert in his school, that technology nowadays enables us to do things which we wouldn't be able to do before. The model we have in Good Angel would not be possible to create 20 years ago. It just wouldn't function as it's structured. So I think that technology is another dimension for it. The third dimension would be war for talent, and I have no doubt that Pavel, in your case, some of your best and smartest people are probably with you, not only because, but also because you are doing what you are doing, and the same will be in your company. So that's yet another dimension for it.
That being involved in CSR is what attracts and retains key.
Partly, that's one of the components. Okay. It's not the only thing which would attract and retain, right. But it's
but it's a more holistic view of business.
Yeah. And I really think that, and I felt it with a relatively small company, Papirius, that when we wanted, we could act quickly and at relatively large scale, much more efficiently than governments and municipalities could act, and that's a wonderful thing.
If someone came to you and asked you, how would you evaluate a CSR program? In other words, what scale, what focus, what scope? I mean, what are the key criteria to understand if this is something that we should do, or how big we should do it, or how should we approach that? Pavel, what would you say to them?
First of all, we try to analyze or check always how important it is for the society, how painful issue should be addressed, or how important issue should be addressed by it. That's always the first test. Then we continue by evaluating whether we can contribute to the solution of the issue by the project, so that we achieve certain visible progress in this area. And more, we then try to evaluate how it is linked to us, to our nature, to our roots. So usually, as I said, we keep strong respect to our history, so it can lead us to certain type of choices, to certain choice. But at the same time, we try to realize what our mission is and how we could contribute to the future development of the society that would be somehow related to our mission in the societies.
What kind of a timeline do you think about when you think of CSR as it relates to Ceska?
Very long term. Very long term effects of what we are doing. We don't need to see immediate effects. We must be sure that it will have benefits and effects in the area we selected, but we strongly differentiate between CSR and sponsorship, and we say we will contribute to something that is not that definitely in the future will be here, will be visible, but nobody probably will link it to us, to our activity. Nobody will be able to calculate how our contribution, what our contribution generated in the meantime, etc. So many next generation will see it clearly, and maybe they won't realize who was in the beginning of the activity, initiative, etc.
It's more of a strategic
Yes,
view than a tactical view of CSR. But there's also an interesting dynamic to it, that the entrepreneurial element of corporate life brought to this whole topic, and that is I think we saw it first with Bill and Melinda Gates when they started donating money to different causes, but Bill Gates demanded to see results from those causes they donated money to, and they called it, I think someone called it entrepreneurial philanthropy. In other words, I'll give you the money, but I want to see what you're going to do with it. You and I had a little bit of a discussion about that, Robert. I mean, do you think that this is running a CSR project similar to how you would run a business? Does that make sense in your world?
Yes, definitely. Yes, you have to understand that I'm still talking from a position of owning and running a small company. So we don't need to report to our shareholders. We're more a small operation, so it's much more closer to what Peter has described. That it's much more quicker in the decisions and so on. And I want to see the results. It's okay if somebody brings. It doesn't need to be a project. It can be a sculpture or something. Who doesn't need only to get paid for an art piece. He needs more. He needs advertisement, but he needs support in terms of the contracts, because many designers they do design for larger corporations, which then treat them ridiculously. I've been seeing this, and so that's where for example, we're trying to help. But back to your question, the way I mean, I'm here mainly to talk about the school because it's the biggest reference. The way I've designed it was that it should be self-sustainable as quickly as possible, so if something happens with me, the school doesn't die out.
This was something we talked about, that you felt that there was a definite business model that needed to be applied to make it sustaining. Tell us more about that, because I know the students that go there have to pay a tuition to come in. How did that model develop, and tell us a little bit more about how yours works?
Yeah. The school is operated as any ordinary Lidová škola umění. Those of you who know in Czech the term. It's an ordinary music school. It has let's say, part of the school is meant for kids of missionaries, of simply people who cannot afford, but they either the kids are very talented, so the teachers or the management says yes, they deserve full support, and come from a socially lower class, let's say, or there are simply families which are very, very pro-cultural but simply cannot afford it and are otherwise contributing to the society with something, you know, they may teach some, it's not relevant now, but so that's a part which is using the money which other clients are paying. The school has several levels of fees depending on how intensive program you use. The budget of the school, now I'll put down the real numbers. Let's say the annual turnover is about 6 million Czech crowns, and the annual profit after tax is about 500,000, 6,000 crowns, depends on which year. Now this money is used, as I said, either partially to support these students. I would say mainly it's used for schools events. So it has a lot of concerts, it runs festivals. By the way, some of the festivals were also supported by Sporitelna.
So you've set up a model where this sort of regenerates itself.
Yes.
This keeps on going.
Yes.
Now, let's go to a completely different model, and that's the one that Petr created at Dobrý Anděl. Tell us about what it is your model does, who it serves, and how it works.
I think first of all it's fair to say that Good Angel, Dobrý Anděl is a Slovak invention. And in Slovakia it's the largest non-corporate philanthropic or charitable effort supporting around 4,000 families with children suffering from cancer, either a child or one of the parents, who got, because of the illness, into financial difficulties. And what's unique about this model is that it's a flow-through, 100% flow-through model. So each individual crown coming from donors, and that's why it's called Good Angel, or Dobrých Andělů, from Good Angels, flows all the way to the families who apply to be part of the program. Another feature is that people, contributors, can see on the internet the profiles and stories of the families they have been supporting.
They know the particular family that.
Yeah, so they see the address, they have contacts, and they see a basic story. As a Good Angel, you cannot obviously select a family because we protect their privacy. At the same time, when a family applies to be part of the program, they give us consent that their individual donors, usually about 10, 15 people would be per one family, that they could see their profiles or a certain part of their profiles which they allowed to be public. So this brings a new level of efficiency to a non-profit sector from a donor's point of view. There is a direct connection between individual people and families. And also another specific thing would be that when we work with companies, and I have a B2B background, so we tend to work with companies quite a bit, our strategy is not to come to Pavel and ask for a chunk of his huge budget for the families, but what we would, in this circumstance, rather do, we would try to introduce Good Angel within the company, introduce the concept, and have people choose if they want to get involved or if they don't want to get involved because they are maybe doing other things.
But how do they get involved, and what does that involvement look like?
Well, what Good Angel does is, you can say purely or only financial support to families, but at the same time, what comes alongside with it is that when you are a family from Ústí nad Labem and you are a single mother with 2 kids, one of them being ill, and suddenly you receive and you pay for just being in the hospital 6,000 a month, 100 per bed per person, and suddenly you have a flow in of 3,000 or 4,000 helping you out. You feel that somewhere out there in the Czech Republic there are people whom you have never met and who will probably never meet you, who trusted Good Angel and gave their support. And at the same time, so essentially what we are running in business terms, it's a platform with 2 very distinct groups. One is donors, individuals, and the other group is families.
Now the donors, how do they get involved? In other words, do I just give you a check for 100,000 crowns or 1,000 crowns, or do I give you 50 crowns a week? I mean, how does it work?
You register on the website, which is just 2 steps, and then you can decide how much per month you want to send to an account. That's your choice. And
what are the ranges that you have?
We have an official minimum, which is 50 crowns, but we would not send the money back if someone sends less. The average is 390 a month per donor, which is a bit higher than we have expected. And that's after we have taken some larger gifts out of the equation.
And how many donors do you have now?
Currently we have about 3,000 donors.
Fantastic. And you just started this, didn't you?
And well, we have just distributed the money yesterday because it's the first day and it happens every month, once a month. And so it was 290 families, each getting 3,800 something coronas.
Fantastic.
So it's
Fantastic.
the bucket is empty again.
But one of the things that we all talked about when I met with you individually is I came away with from our discussions with the feeling that the 20th century, with regards to corporate philanthropy, was more about tax deductions, and the 21st century is more about civil society. And the responsibility that you feel in contributing to the formation of a civil society. Why the change, do you think? I mean, on a societal level, why the change? I mean, someone I could advance the argument that the reason this has happened is that we've seen what happens in a society when things go wrong, the financial meltdown, the real estate bubble, the tech bubble when people get greedy and so on. I mean, what are your views about that? What was the shift? Pavel, was there a shift in how you think society looked at this?
My opinion is that people who feel certain responsibility, how the societies are developing, and responsibility, and feel or keep close touch with how the society lives, probably realize more and more that the governments, let's ask why, are not able to address and solve big social issues and problems. It's impossible. For many reasons, it's more for politologists probably, or I don't know, so for whom.
Your premise is that government cannot solve those things.
Definitely, it's empirical. There are sufficient empirical evidence. It's a reality. It's a fact. We can talk about why, but it's a reality. So maybe it caused the shift from very opportunistic and I would say even pragmatic approach to something else, qualitative new stuff, which is a very responsible effort to contribute to mitigating or solving certain social issues. Maybe it's behind. As I watch it in a reality, when I talk with people like our friends here or anybody else in today's world.
Robert, what are your thoughts about that?
I don't know, I have this little theory that it also comes in combination with the technology and the whole technology sector who got an importance in the corporate world. And it's associated with younger people. And they, I think they, you know, they're much more into smaller projects, much more, you know, they're bringing it into the corporations. It just comes from beneath and it raises up.
So it's a newer generation that's bringing a new way to look at this.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Well, there's a beautiful book called Blessed Unrest by an American environmentalist, Paul Hawken.
Blessed
Unrest.
Blessed
Unrest. Describing millions of projects and NGOs, organizations throughout the world, including the third world, and the way to look at the planet or the civilization. One of the many ways you can look at it as an organism, and the organism has certain bigger or larger pains and illnesses, and there is an immune system response. And the immune system of the civilization is reacting and filling up the holes, which, for example, governments in most cases are unable to plug because of many reasons which are beyond this discussion, as Pavel pointed out. So he would argue that it's a whole massive global trend, and it's as Robert said, it's partly powered by technology. But it's much more than technology.
So I mean, what I'm hearing is that corporate social responsibility really goes down to a molecular level, down to, you know, the individual act. And I mean, that's what you're talking about in this book. How do you know what you're doing is having an impact? I mean, Pavel, do you take a look at that on an annual basis? I mean, what your contributions as an organization to CSR, what they're actually accomplishing, or do you hold any kind of measure to it?
In some areas, it's not difficult. You can see immediate benefits or effects. If you contribute to the organization that care for disabled or handicapped people, so it's relatively well measurable. If you help to organize big cultural events like Prague Spring or Smetanova Litomyšl, you can measure directly or indirectly the benefits and effects. Definitely, what's hardly measurable is the impact on the cultural level of the society, but it's the final end goal. Usually you can't measure the end goal. You only hope that it will contribute in the long term to it. In some areas, specifically just what we are just now preparing, if you go more for this strategic CSR, it's again the first line immediate effects are measurable. You can measure how many people you involve in the program, how many people were directly impacted. But again, the end effect and benefits is you must trust, or you must believe that it is there, it will be there, and it will help the society.
You are in a unique position in the sense that, as I understand it, you have created the largest CSR fund in the history of the country. I think it's more than 2 billion crowns. Can you tell us a couple of just tactical things? I mean, this is a huge amount of money. How do you decide where the money goes? Who makes that decision? Give us a little bit about the technicalities of it. How did it come about?
It's so big money that we couldn't afford to decide on our own. It was impossible. By the way, the money, yes, they legally they belong to us. It's a you maybe know the resource. It's the it will be the money will rest from the anonymous account, savings accounts or savings books, according to the law in EU. It will be abolished, and if people forget or don't know that they own it, so the money that will rest with you can be a part of your profit, taxed profit, but it's your profit. We decided to share it fully with the society, to give it back to the society. It was the first decision, because we don't feel that it would belong to us. Legally, yes; ethically, not. That was the first decision approved by our shareholders. The second big question was what to do, ideally, optimally, with the money. We had some ideas, but we approached people that you would personally know, and I hope appreciate, who are definitely recognized as somebody who knows well the society and who always understand what's good for the long-term positive development of the society. And when we started, I expected relatively broad range of potential purposes. That was my expectation. And I was positively surprised that during the discussions we managed to generate something that was relatively narrow, more and more specific, in the very beginning relatively general, and it very well corresponded with what I mentioned before, with the history of savings bank in the world, not only of Ceska, that tried to help people to stand on their own feet and to become independent from the money of others, from the welfare, etc., etc. That time, in early, let's say, in the beginning of 19th century, it was relatively easy. It was about to teach people work regularly, save regularly, and spend responsibly. Now it's a more general know-how, not fully rooted, but it's more general know-how. So I was extremely happy that with the people who we met, and I personally met, that we identified something similar for the new times, for the future of the society. And it was definitely in area of education that would make people more employable. And we tried to generate something that would have many leverage effects, that would help not only specific people that you know personally, that you involved in the program, that it would have big leverage effects that would involve multiples of people involved in the projects with uncalculable impact on the whole society, on the competitiveness of the society, but on the personal competitiveness of thousands of now young people, but in the future employed people or mature people.
It goes beyond the old teach a man to fish parable to teach a man how to teach other people to fish, and you have this multiplier effect. Very, very interesting. I want to stop for a moment before we go on, because we have a lot of CSR professionals and people that are deeply involved in this business with us tonight. And I want to ask if there are some questions from the audience before we go on to get you involved while we have these three executives here. Do we have a question that someone wants to float for the moment? We have one over here. Can you hand him the mic, please?
I'm coming from Good Brand and Company, which is a consultancy. We work for CSR strategies for already 15 years. I represent the Central European branch of that, and I'm really fascinated with your personal experience and contributions you made by yourself. It's really a very interesting story. We as consultants who try to help to build sustainable brands across Europe, sometimes we work for global brands, sometimes for local brands. We meet in our practice very often people who are from completely other area than you are, who are not personally involved. And at a certain point of our activity, we decided to talk to people who are already converted into the CSR manner of thinking. And I wonder, because I'm quite interested in CSR leaders and this shape of mind you represent. Probably you watch the other leaders of the other companies. I wonder, do you feel any difference of the style of the management, of the style of organization, how your personal involvement influence the style of your organization? Or do you influence your company, or you are more convincing to your people, or your personal involvement helps to change the organization somehow? It would be also interesting to see how this operates on a different scale of the organization, because sometimes people say, okay, CSR is something which is reserved for the big companies, for the corporate world. But I wonder, how does it work sometimes in Czech Republic in particular, on small, medium enterprises level?
All right, Pavel, why don't you take that and run with it to begin with?
I can start with our experience, or our effort, at least. We tried very much to withdraw personally from identifying the best opportunities in CSR. We called it, let's find out, or vyhledejme. Let's find out what's the most powerful model, most powerful content. So really we checked many chances, opportunities. We checked several models how to do it. So it looked more like analytical work, but we always kept in mind that it must be somehow related to our mission and history. But after we found it, we put really our energy, personal energy, into it, because then you must become advocate internally. To a certain extent, externally, external communication of CSR is very sensitive issue. You shouldn't be visible, I would say, in the same way as you do sponsoring or other business, traditional business stuff.
It's almost a feeling of not anonymity or not completely withdrawing, but you certainly, in your view, don't put Ceska out in front of this effort. I mean, this is something of a different nature. Absolutely. As you said, it's something different than a sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. So that was our approach, and in other companies, what I like always, if I enter any small or big company, and if I find that they do something that is really CSR, not sponsoring, not business, but somehow related to what they do, what's their mission. Energy and environment, for instance, is a very, etc., etc. So,
that goes back to one of your points earlier that CSR, in order for it to be a genuine effort, should have some relationship to the business in a way. Can you contribute? Can you make a difference in this area? But I think, you know, your question, I think, is a very good one, and it brings to mind another aspect of CSR. I mean, when we think of CSR, I think most of us think of the external effort that it is. It's CSR. It's helping outside the corporation. But what about inside? I mean, is there an internal impact that CSR has on a corporation or a culture? Pavel, what would you say to that?
That it's crucial. It's crucial. You must buy first your employees. You must buy first your organization for the idea, because you have natural advocates, you marketeers, etc., etc. And they all, if you put your money into foundation or so it could be utilized within your company for bonuses, for investments, for improving of the environment, working environment, etc., etc. So you must be sure always that it's almost consensus in the organization that you do right thing and that it's good sacrifice in quotation marks.
But I mean, it has a definite impact on the culture of the company. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. It's unavoidable part of the organization itself, because you're taking money, just as Pavel said, you're taking money which otherwise you could have reinvested back into your company, and you're placing it outside. So you need to have an agreement of everybody. It's not only about you being, the big boss. It's you want to motivate the smallest guy in the office. You want him to be convinced that this is good, that it's actually bringing him a positive value as well.
Well, now that's interesting, because I mean, if you go back to this movement of responsibility of leadership, the corporate governance movement that started as a result of some of the missteps of corporations in the United States at the last decade of the 20th century, some proponents of that would say that the highest interest of a leader would be to return a profit to the shareholders and the investors in that business. But what I think I'm hearing is that in your world, the fiduciary responsibility of a leader is broader than that, or perhaps in a way that impacts that in an indirect way. What would you say to that, Petr?
Well, there are apparently both schools of thoughts. One would be create as much profit as you can, distribute it to the shareholders, and they know best how to do good with the money. And then there is the other school. I think the decision ultimately lies with the shareholders, especially on strategic framework, how the company wants to approach this. However, as I think I mentioned earlier, companies, unlike individuals, have some advantages, and that's the advantages of scale, cooperation, multiple people, energy, and lots of others. So I think, regardless, some of the smaller or large problems we are facing, can't be solved by individuals alone. They would still need to create some kind of organization anyway. So I have no doubt that companies, organizations are well positioned to do quite a lot of good very efficiently.
To take another view of that, I think what we're getting to here is a reinvention of thinking about this whole topic, and it's a different approach, and there seems to be an evolution of it, as Petr is indicating. I mean, what would you add to that feeling of change in the mentality about it?
What Peter mentioned is the two schools and two approaches. Maybe they have always one in common. The shareholder must agree. We must support. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And if you are a large company with many shareholders, you distribute your profit via dividends. You lose, and they can do anything. They can be socially responsible. You lose the possibility to do something that is possible only via concentrating the money at one place, which can have some impact that smaller distributed efforts can't have. So I would always, both approaches are okay, and in fact they are always combined in the society, which is good.
Before we conclude, are there any other questions from the audience that people would like to put forth to the panel? Anyone else out there with a question?
I have a little bit different question. How would you decide when to stop certain CSR project or activity? Because you might be promoting or supporting certain cause for years, and suddenly you arrive to the point when you think maybe we should stop and move somewhere else. So what are the points that you consider when you shift? Maybe this is for Pavel, because you might have many more projects.
Yeah. If the topic or the issue that you wanted to solve or that you wanted to contribute for solving is disappearing from the society or is being solved, is not more an issue or pain point, so it's a time to switch your effort, energy and money to something more useful, more important. The other definitely situation that you must ponder over switching it somewhere else is that you don't see any effect of what you are doing in helping something or addressing some issue or etc. for various reasons. And the third situation is that somebody else is much more capable in this area, so it's a pity to spend money there, and you should select something that your know-how can be utilized much better than in the area that the others are better. So I'm not talking about business competition, but there is as well certain competition, and always we should give money to the places where they can bring the highest possible effect. When we started to identify what are the chances for our big money, and we listed the social or the issues of the society, one of it was lack of trust for the political scene, etc. But we ascertained that it's not within at least our capabilities to address it, to solve it, to contribute to the solution. So we identified it as an issue, but that definitely maybe not solvable by the private money or only partly, but definitely nothing that we would feel ourselves as strong enough to achieve visible effects.
I would not ask a question, I would a little bit argue. And you said that, but you know, I quite disagree with the comment that we have two options: to distribute everything to the shareholders, or you know, to distribute something, you know, as part of the CSR. I think that it is probably a short-term view, but long-term, you cannot be profitable. You cannot have good business, you know, if you are not genuinely involved in CSR, because you would either lose your good people or your clients. And the situation has changed quite dramatically. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, if you open a website of a company, you could not find CSR on the first page. Now you will find it in basically all cases. The situation has changed. I think that the businesses take CSR as part of their business, and shareholders take CSR in broader sense, including sustainability and so on, as part of good business they want to see from their managers.
And I think we're hearing that, by the way. I think that the discussion was more of an intellectual observation that these are two polar opposites of how that money could be used. But I think we're in agreement with that.
Is not making from CSR a part of our business. We want our CSR to have certain relation to our business, not today, not tomorrow, not for me, not for my employees, maybe for my successors or so, but somehow contribute to, as our predecessors or generations that were here before us did something that now we are harvesting the fruits. But I have never met the guys who they are dead for ages. So that's my approach.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Miriam Menishkova, and I come from my personal social responsible project, so-called Chairman. And I have a question, maybe to Petr Sykora. We've heard so many discussions about helping and supporting people who are either ill or poor or have some social issues. Do you feel, or do you agree or disagree that the social responsibility or the corporate social responsibility must go only towards those socially somehow poor or disabled people, or can it be also oriented and can support somehow development and further, let's say, also education and development of the regular, normal people or children?
One of the ways, there are lots of ways how to look at this. One of them would be, what are the greatest issues, problems, black spots, holes in the system out there, and try to address them. However, the other issue or approach could be, let's focus on those where we can actually help and have some meaningful results. And those two groups don't need to be always the same. Also, I think the way, and again I will go back to the book Blessed Unrest, the way social responsibility works and the whole ecosystem of NGOs works and charitable organization works. It's like a market. It's like a market where companies start up and grow, and some of them fail. There are some hot topics and areas, and companies or NGOs would gravitate there, and therefore there would be areas which get almost inadequate amount of support, focus, and help, and there would be areas which the government has not taken care of, and not even the big corporates has not taken care of. So I think we are living in a very imperfect world in this sense. And I believe over the long term, things tend to even out.
I think that you bring up a very interesting point, actually, and I think it's one that Pavel touched on in response to another question. I'll let you, you're reading my mind, go ahead and jump in.
It's an excellent question, because you really deal with it when you try to identify the best opportunities for your CSR. We at the end of the day of the effort, we will combine both approaches. We will select the most talented and the best students in universities who would normally end in a bank or in a big business or public administration. We will enable them to go teach to the primary and secondary schools. So we help the best talented people, but at the same time, and we studied it, we analyzed it, we are not going to put them into the elite schools, because there they have excellent care, excellent education, sponsored by rich parents and being cared by the best teachers. We will put them into the medium quality or low quality schools to show, to enable the best people to teach useful expertise for those students, pupils and students that on standard way hadn't seen good teacher for there and couldn't gain positive positive relation to maths and some other specializations, so etc. And to increase the benchmarks in those that type of schools, etc., etc. So we combine both, and we try to involve the best talents in helping the needed part of population.
And there, before we get to your response, there's another point here that you made earlier. I think it was in a conversation, Petr, that you and I had, that while Dobrý Anděl has a specific focus for what it does, you also view it as a gateway mechanism for people to sort of get a taste of what it's like to be a mini philanthropist, and maybe they will do their own thing in the future. Is that part of your thinking?
It's a spillover effect, and along the same lines as we got inspired by the Slovak founders to start this, there are hopefully people who are positioned to do this, picking up their own projects which they are passionate about.
Super. Robert, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, it was a very good question, because we have questioned ourselves many times at the very beginning of when I was setting up the school, because at that time was year 1997 and 1998, and the idea was to combine these two groups. On one hand, the school is teaching students who pay, I would say, sizable fees. So what kind of philanthropy is that, you know? But at that time, we also combined the other group, which were simply talented, but could not afford the same level of education. Years later, I sided with Petr Kellner's school. You know, he did that model. But for me, it was kind of a revolutionary concept, how to combine that, because you run these events, concerts, and then you have these two groups. You know, one parent comes with bodyguards, and the other one has hardly, you know, something to eat next month. So it was quite difficult to manage this so that there is nobody offended, and each kid has the same treatment, and so that the kids between themselves do not show off. You know, and there are many aspects, but this was definitely a big question for us.
All right, I want to, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank the three of you for a wonderful discussion, and I want to thank a wonderful audience for your participation in this, and please join me in thanking them. Thank you very much.